Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. For the past week, it was at least a little tiny bit of an open question about how the second Trump administration would govern. I think today we got our answer, and that little window has closed. In quick succession this afternoon, Donald Trump announced former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard as his pick to be the National Intelligence Director, and sitting Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. Well, maybe not sitting anymore, as Gaetz has apparently already offered his resignation from Congress amidst his nomination. Now, both of those decisions, along with picking the guy from Fox and Friends to be Secretary of Defense, are, shocking and appalling in their own way. But the Gaetz pick is really its own thing. Definitely set off alarm bells throughout Washington. You may recall Gaetz was once investigated by the Department of Justice, the very agency he's now being tapped to lead, on allegations of sex trafficking. To be clear, Gaetz denies those allegations. He was never charged with a crime. The takeaway here is obvious. Donald Trump is testing the limits of what he can get away with. Matt Gaetz is unique in one regard. He is almost unanimously loathed by everyone in the Republican Party, regardless of ideology. That's, of course, in large part because he forced out Republican Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, apparently because McCarthy refused to squash an ethics probe into Gaetz's conduct. At least that's according to McCarthy. Here's how McCarthy later put it.
I'll give you the truth why I'm not Speaker. It's because one person, a member of Congress, wanted me to stop an ethics complaint because he slept with a 17-year-old. An ethics complaint that started before I ever became Speaker, and that's illegal, and I'm not going to get in the middle.
Gaetz denies those allegations, as I said. The stunt that Gaetz pulled, which was kicking McCarthy out of the speakership, right, with that vote of no confidence, it didn't make him many friends in Congress. Just listen to Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma just a year ago.
This is a guy that the media didn't give a time of day to after he was accused of sleeping with an underage girl. And there's a reason why no one in the conference came and defended him, because we had all seen the videos he was showing on the House floor that all of us had walked away of the girls that he had slept with. He'd brag about how he would crush ED medicine and chase it with an energy drink so he could go all night. This is obviously before he got married. And so when that accusation came out, no one defended him.
Gaetz denies those allegations as well. But that certainly appears to be representative of how most of his fellow Republicans, just Republicans, view him. When Punchbowl asked Republican Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska to react to Gaetz's nomination, he remarked, "I've got no good comment." While Republican Mike Simpson of Idaho said, "Are you bleeping me?" Republican Max Miller of Ohio, a former Trump aide, said this.
I just think it's silly. I believe that the president is probably rewarding him for being such a loyal soldier to the president. But the president is smart enough and his team is smart enough to know that Mr. Gaetz will never get confirmed by the Senate. Mr. Gaetz breaks things to break things, and then once he breaks it even more. And that is somebody who should not be the Attorney General of the United States. I can tell you, I'm not the only one out of 222 that we'll end up with that is happy that he is leaving this conference.
Okay, so bottom line, the people closest to Matt Gaetz who serve with him view him as a man of exceptionally low character. They loathe him. And I think it's fair to say he couldn't win a secret ballot for Senate confirmation if you just took the Republicans. But of course, cabinet confirmation votes are not secret. So again, this is a purity test by Donald Trump. He wants to see how much he can get away with. He is forcing Senate Republicans to do the indefensible in service of their dear leader. That said, nothing is a foregone conclusion. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska has already signaled she may oppose Gaetz.
I don't think it's a serious nomination for the Attorney General. We need to have a serious Attorney General, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to consider somebody that is serious. This one was not on my bingo card.
Murkowski's opposition is not enough, though. Congressional Republicans have not exactly shown a lot of backbone when it comes to opposing Trump. Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama is already threatening his colleagues to close ranks around Matt Gaetz.
Will Matt Gaetz get the votes in the Senate?
I don't know. You're finding all the swamp creatures coming out right now. Everybody's got an opinion up here. But at the end of the day, President Trump was elected by an enormous vote. And he deserves a team around him that he wants. It's not us to determine that. We've got 53 votes in the Senate. We can confirm with 51. I've already seen where a couple of them says, I'm not voting for him. Wait a minute. You are not the United States of America. You have one vote in the U.S. Senate. You did not get elected president. Vote with President Trump. This is the last chance we're going to have of saving this country. And if you want to get in the way, fine. But we're going to try to get you out of the Senate, too, if you try to do that.
So that's the message. Seems to be received by some, like Senator Markwayne Mullin, the guy who went on camera to say no one would defend Gaetz against allegations he slept with a 17-year-old.
Are you going to vote for Matt Gaetz?
You know, Matt Gaetz and I, there's no question that we've had our differences. They've been very public about it. I completely trust President Trump's decision-making on this one. But at the same time, he's got to come to Congress and sell himself.
Hearings, I guess, over this? So, again, we don't know what's going to happen. This seems like one of those moments where Democratic input, pushback, phone calls to lawmakers, senators particularly, who are going to have a vote on this, matter a lot. It's possible Gaetz can get through, but again, he's very unpopular. And I think it's fair to say when you talk about that mandate, the very narrow national majority, 1.5 points that voted for Donald Trump, I don't think they were putting Matt Gaetz at AG. But if Democrats in the Senate don't want to see him as the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, at the very least, they're going to need to pick a very public fight about it. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut won re-election by a decisive margin of almost 19% last week. He also ran the top of the ticket, and he joins me now. Well, let's start, Senator. I mean, the advise and consent role of the Senate is an important one. It can be frustrating and maddening when it's abused to keep people out of positions. But this seems to me like one of those situations where who's going to run the Department of Justice? Matt Gaetz. It seems pretty important for the Senate to exercise some advice and consent here.
Yeah, listen, I think this is kind of a before and after moment. Donald Trump said transparently during the campaign that he wanted to use the power of his office to go after his political opponents. Project 2025 called for the Department of Justice to just become another arm of the White House. And now he is executing that plan. I don't know that you return from a decision to end the independence of the judiciary. It is one of the hallmarks, the bedrocks, a foundation of American democracy that the Department of Justice stands up for everybody and applies the rule of law fairly. Matt Gaetz is going to do whatever the White House tells him to do. Matt Gaetz has made it clear that he thinks law enforcement should bend their knee to the Trump White House. And I don't know that this is American democracy any longer if Matt Gaetz is simply executing the wishes of a very political, partisan, and vindictive White House. So, yes, I do not think that this is what Americans voted for, in part because a lot of people didn't believe Donald Trump when he said, I'm going to use the power of my office to go after my political opponents. They thought that was bluster. They thought that that was just tough talk. And now the American public are seeing that he wasn't kidding around. And I think the American public may have something to say about that.
Yeah, I want to stay on that, and then I want to talk a little deeper about this sort of question of what this election was and wasn't about, which I think is, important here. I mean, to me, the mechanics, this is a test here a little bit about whether these mechanics are going to function. In any other universe, like Gaetz is not confirmable. He's not, again, this is not an ideological statement by yours truly. Like, there are tons of Republican lawyers you can name that would be confirmed. Like, Gaetz is not confirmable. When Murkowski said it's not a serious pick, like, it's forcing Republican senators to vote on something manifestly absurd on purpose. And the question is, are they going to do it?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that Lisa Murkowski is much of a signal.
Right. Totally.
Lisa has never had any compunction about standing up to Donald Trump publicly. Yes, I think that this is an early effort to force Senate Republicans into utter and complete submission. If they do something as farcical as putting Matt Gaetz in as the Attorney General, then the game is over. There is nothing that they will not do. And so he's putting the test to Senate Republicans early on. Are you going to be my agents as I try to convert this country from a democracy to something that looks very different from a democracy? Or are you going to exercise any independent judgment? We're going to have a very early test of that. It is hard when I think about it. To believe that there aren't 4 or 5 Senate Republicans that will vote no on Matt Gaetz. I know these people personally. I know how I know how they feel about him.